The golden spires of Nova Carthage pierced the violet sky, their gleaming surfaces masking the corruption that festered within the Crethian Empire's capital. Thera pressed her hands against the transparent barrier of her containment cell, her iridescent scales dulling with each passing cycle. As a Nilaxian healer, her gift for cellular regeneration had made her valuable, too valuable to be left free. The laboratory where they kept her hummed with equipment designed to harness her abilities. Dr. Voss, her Crethian overseer, approached with his characteristic slow stride, mandibles clicking in anticipation. "Another batch of soldiers requires your services," he announced, voice devoid of emotion. Thera's antenna drooped slightly, but she maintained her composure. She had learned early that showing weakness only made things worse. The Crethians had conquered her homeworld 3 cycles ago, transforming her people's gift of healing into a weapon of war. They used Nilaxian abilities to create super soldiers, healing their battle wounds instantly and pushing them beyond their natural limits. The door hissed open, and 2 guards escorted her to the medical bay. The wounded soldiers lay on biobeds, their chrome-plated armor bearing the scars of recent combat. Thera's hands moved mechanically over their injuries, her natural bioluminescence pulsing with each healing touch. She felt the familiar drain as her energy transferred into their bodies, knitting flesh and bone back together. "Fascinating," Dr. Voss muttered, recording data on his holopad. "Your species' efficiency hasn't decreased despite prolonged captivity." "Most interesting." A commotion in the corridor interrupted his observations. The facility's alarms began wailing, and emergency lights bathed the room in crimson. Through the chaos, Thera heard something she hadn't expected: human voices. The humans were supposed to be contained in their own sector of space, held back by the Crethian fleet. Yet here they were, their presence sending the facility into panic. The guards rushed to defensive positions, leaving Thera momentarily unattended. Through the observation window, she caught her first glimpse of them. They moved with purpose, their tactics unlike anything she'd seen in Crethian military protocols. Where the Crethians relied on brute force and overwhelming numbers, these humans operated with precision and adaptability. A sudden explosion. "I'll come with you," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "But not just to heal. I want to fight." Reyes smiled, and for the first time in years, Thera felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. As they boarded the human vessel and broke through Nova Carthage's atmosphere, she watched the golden spires recede into the distance. Her imprisonment had ended, but she knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be learning to be free again and helping others break their own chains. The human ship vanished into FTL, leaving behind a city in chaos and a laboratory full of very confused Crethians. Thera's liberation would soon become a spark, though she didn't know it yet. A spark that would ignite a fire across the stars. The Resistance's hope. The Helios base hung in the shadow of a metallic moon, its external lights dimmed to avoid detection. Commander Diana Walsh stood before the holographic display, studying the intricate web of Crethian supply lines and military installations. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, each strand earned from years of fighting an enemy that outgunned and outnumbered humanity at every turn. "The Nilaxians' arrival changes everything," Lieutenant Reyes reported, standing at attention. "She's already helped heal 3 of our critically wounded operatives, injuries that would have taken months to recover from, fixed in minutes." Diana nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. "And what does she want in return?" "That's just it, Commander. She wants to fight. She's been providing intel on Crethian facilities, where other Nilaxians are being held. The information matches our surveillance data." The commander finally turned, her expression thoughtful. The Resistance had been fighting the guerrilla war against the Crethian Empire for the past 5 years, ever since they expanded beyond their agreed-upon borders and began enslaving species for their biological capabilities. Humanity had chosen to fight back, not just for themselves, but for all the species who couldn't. In the medical bay, Thera worked tirelessly, her bioluminescent hands moving from patient to patient. She had never used her ability so freely before, and the joy of healing without coercion gave her strength. Dr. Jin, the base's chief medical officer, watched in amazement as wounds that would normally require extensive surgery simply knitted themselves closed. "Your abilities are remarkable," Dr. Jin said, making notes on her tablet. "But aren't you exhausted?" Thera's antenna quivered slightly. "Among my people, healing was never meant to be done in isolation. We worked in groups, sharing the burden. The Crethians forced us to heal beyond our limits, but here," she paused, looking around the medical bay, "here I can rest when I need to. It makes all the difference." Commander Walsh entered the medical bay, her presence commanding immediate attention. She carried herself like someone who had seen too much war, but hadn't let it break her spirit. "Thera, I need to speak with you." They moved to a private consultation room, where Diana activated a privacy field. "We've confirmed the locations of 3 other facilities holding your people. The intelligence you provided matches our own findings. But I need to know, are you absolutely certain you want to be involved in their liberation? This isn't your war." Thera's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of strong emotion among her species. "With respect, Commander, this became my war the moment the Crethians turned my people's gift into a weapon. We Nylaxians believe that to heal is to preserve life, to maintain balance. What they've done is an abomination." Diana studied her for a long moment. "We're planning something bigger than just rescue missions. The Crethians have made a critical mistake. They've concentrated their biological warfare research in a handful of major facilities. If we can liberate these facilities and expose their practices to the galactic community, it would force neutral systems to take a stand." Thera finished, her antenna rising in excitement. "Many worlds trade with the Crethians simply because they fear them. If they knew the true cost of that trade." "Exactly. But we need someone who understands Nylaxian abilities, someone who can help coordinate the rescued healers and ensure they're willing to tell their stories." Diana leaned forward. "It's a lot to ask, especially of someone who's just gained their freedom." Thera's response was immediate. "My people have a saying. To heal one is noble. To prevent the suffering of many is divine. I will help you, Commander Walsh, but I have one condition." "Name it." "When we free my people, we don't just offer them sanctuary. We offer them a choice. The same choice your Lieutenant Reyes gave me. The choice to fight back." Diana smiled, seeing in Thera the same fire that had driven humanity to resist the Crethians in the first place. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Welcome to the Resistance, officially." Over the next few days, the base hummed with preparation. Thera worked with the tactical teams, teaching them about Nylaxian physiology and helping them understand how to safely transport freed healers. She learned human combat techniques, her natural agility making her a quick study with light weapons. But more importantly, she learned about humanity's reason for fighting. They showed her their histories, their own stories of slavery and liberation, of standing up against overwhelming odds. She began to understand that humans fought not because they were barbaric, as Crethian propaganda claimed, but because they couldn't stand by while others suffered. As the plans for the first major liberation operation took shape, Thera found herself spending more time with Commander Walsh, learning about strategy and leadership. The human commander had a gift for inspiring others, for helping them see beyond their immediate circumstances to a future worth fighting for. "The Crethians think they understand power," Diana told her one evening, as they reviewed tactical simulations. "They think it comes from conquest, from forcing others to submit. But real power comes from choice, from people choosing to stand together, to fight together, to believe in something bigger than themselves." Hidden strengths. The facility on Nexus IV loomed before them, a stark monument to Crethian brutality disguised as scientific progress. Through the viewport of the stealth shuttle, Thera studied the building where 23 of her people were being held. Her scales rippled with barely contained anger as she recognized the distinctive architecture of a research center. Lieutenant Reyes checked her tactical display one final time. Security patterns match your intelligence. They're rotating guards every 4 hours, with a 3-minute overlap during shift changes. That's our window. The resistance team had spent weeks preparing for this mission. They had 3 stealth shuttles, each carrying a mix of human operators and medical personnel. Commander Walsh had insisted on leading this operation personally, understanding its significance as the first major strike against the Krethians' biological weapons program. Remember, Diana addressed the assembled team. We're not just here to free prisoners. We're here to show the galaxy that the Krethians can be fought, that their power isn't absolute. She turned to Thera. Are you ready? Thera touched the combat suit they'd modified for her physiology. I've been ready since the day they took my world. The infiltration began during the guard rotation. While Krethian attention was focused on the shift change, specially trained technicians introduced a localized power fluctuation. It wasn't enough to trigger major alarms, but it created enough confusion to mask their approach. Thera moved with the first team, her modified neural disruptor designed to incapacitate without killing. The resistance didn't believe in unnecessary casualties, another surprise she had discovered about humans. They fought hard, but they fought smart, understanding that every death could create more enemies. The first real challenge came at the containment level. Dr. Voss's security protocols have been implemented across all Krethian facilities, and the neural suppressors keeping the Nilaxian healers docile were hardwired into the building's power grid. This wasn't in the intel, Rise muttered, studying the security panel. They've upgraded the systems. A standard override won't work. Thera stepped forward, her antenna twitching as she sensed the familiar hum of the suppressors. The Krethians understand our biology, but they don't understand our culture. When they designed these systems, they focused on our individual abilities. They never considered how we might work together. She placed her hands on the security panel, closing her eyes. The resistance team watched in amazement as her bioluminescence began to pulse in a complex pattern. Inside the containment cells, the imprisoned Nilaxians responded, their own bioluminescence synchronizing with hers. In the ancient times, Thera explained, her voice trained with concentration, our people would join their energies to heal entire ecosystems. The Krethians tried to isolate us, to break those connections, but they never truly understood what they were dealing with. The combined energy of 24 Nilaxians created a feedback loop in the suppressor system. Alarms blared as the security grid struggled to compensate for the unexpected surge. With a spectacular flash, the suppressors overloaded and failed. Diana immediately began directing teams to secure the freed healers. But something was wrong. The Nilaxians emerged from their cells disoriented, their movements uncoordinated. Years of forced healing and chemical suppression had taken their toll. They're not ready for combat, Rise reported. We need to modify the extraction plan. That's when the facility's main defense systems activated. Heavy security doors began sealing off sections of the building, and the distinctive sound of Krethian battle mechs echoed through the corridors. They're trying to box us in, Diana realized. Standard containment protocol. They'll keep us here until their main force arrives. Thera looked at her fellow Nilaxians, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. Then she remembered what Commander Walsh had taught her about real power, about choices. My people. She addressed them in their native language, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that conveyed emotional context. I know you're afraid. I know you've suffered. But right now, you have a choice. These humans have risked everything to give us a chance at freedom. Will you help them? Will you help yourselves? One by one, the freed Nilaxians straightened, their natural dignity reasserting itself. They might not be warriors, but they were healers. And sometimes, healing meant fighting back against those who would cause harm. What followed was unlike anything in the Resistance's combat doctrine. The Nilaxians formed healing circles, using their combined abilities not just to heal, but to enhance. Human operators found their reflexes sharper, their endurance greater. When injuries occurred, they were healed almost instantly. The Krethian battle mechs, programmed for conventional combat, struggled to adapt to enemies who could recover from devastating hits in seconds. The resistance teams, working in perfect synchronization with their Nilaxian allies, systematically disabled the facility's defenses. Diana watched in amazement as her forces and the freed healers developed entirely new tactics on the fly. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was becoming something more, a demonstration of what was possible when different species chose to work together, to trust each other. Echoes of freedom. News of the Nexus IV liberation spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Crethian Empire's carefully maintained image of invincibility had cracked. Security footage of Nilaxian healers working alongside human fighters leaked onto public networks, inspiring underground resistance movements on dozens of worlds. But with success came consequences. The Crethian High Command dispatched their most ruthless strategist, Supreme Commander Vorax, to handle what they now termed the human infection. His first act was to order the immediate termination of all Nilaxian subjects in remaining facilities. The Resistance intercepted this order, and Diana knew they had minutes, not hours, to act. "We can't hit all the facilities simultaneously," she told her assembled command staff. "We don't have the numbers." "Then we make them think we do," Thera suggested. Her time with the Resistance had taught her to think like a tactician. The Crethians believe in overwhelming force. Let's give them exactly what they expect, just not where they expect it. The plan they devised was audacious. While the main Resistance fleet prepared for what appeared to be a massive assault on the largest remaining facility on Dracon Prime, smaller teams would strike at lesser facilities across Crethian space. The freed Nilaxians had provided detailed layouts of every research center they knew about. "This is more than a rescue mission now," Diana addressed her crews. "This is our chance to show the galaxy that the Crethians aren't invincible, that when we stand together, we can accomplish the impossible." The operation began with a spectacular display of force at Dracon Prime. The Resistance fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons blazing. Supreme Commander Vorax responded exactly as predicted, diverting the bulk of his forces to crush this apparent major offensive. But the real action was happening elsewhere. Small, fast strike teams slipped past reduced security at other facilities. Lieutenant Rice led one such team, accompanied by Thera and a group of combat-trained Nilaxian healers. Their target was a secret facility buried in the ice caves of Rital II. They encountered unexpected resistance. Vorax, more cunning than they'd anticipated, had left elite shock troops at key installations. The strike team found themselves pinned down in a frozen corridor, enemy fire melting the ice around them. "We need a new approach," Rice shouted over the firefight. "We're running out of time before they can execute their termination protocols." Thera studied the ice walls around them, an idea forming. The Crethians always underestimate other species' abilities. They think they know everything about what Nilaxians can do. She gathered the other healers. They're wrong. Together, they focused their healing energy not on people, but on the ice itself. Manipulating cellular structures was their gift, and ice, with its crystalline pattern, responded to their influence. The walls began to shift and flow, creating new passages while sealing others. The Crethian troops, suddenly finding themselves isolated and disoriented, fell into disarray. The Resistance teams pressed their advantage, using the transformed environment to outmaneuver their enemies. Similar scenes played out across Crethian space. Each facility fell in unique ways, as humans and Nilaxians combined their strengths in unprecedented ways. Some teams used healing energy to overload security systems. Others created biological decoys to confuse enemy sensors. At Dracon Prime, Commander Walsh's fleet executed a masterful fighting retreat, drawing Vorax's forces further from the other facilities. The Supreme Commander realized too late that he had been outmaneuvered. By the time he ordered his ships to reverse course, the last research center had fallen. But victory came with a price. Several strike teams didn't make it back. Others returned with heavy casualties. The Resistance lost good people, humans who had given their lives to free others from bondage. In the aftermath, as the rescued Nilaxians were brought to safe havens, Diana found Thera in the Helios base's memorial garden. The healer was placing luminescent flowers, a Nilaxian tradition, beside the names of fallen resistance fighters. "I never understood why humans would risk so much for others," Thera said softly. "The Crethians taught us that your species was selfish, concerned only with your own survival. But now I see that they feared you precisely because you're not." A new dawn. 3 months after the liberation of the research facilities, the galaxy had changed. The Crethian Empire faced unprecedented challenges as evidence of their atrocities spread across neutral systems. Trade agreements were suspended, diplomatic relations severed. But more importantly, other enslaved species began to resist. The Helios base had transformed from a hidden resistance outpost into a symbol of interstellar cooperation. Freed Nilaxians worked alongside humans, teaching and learning, combining their knowledge in ways that benefited both species. But Supreme Commander Vorax wasn't finished. He had spent months gathering forces for one final, devastating assault. "They're coming with everything they have," Diana announced to the assembled Leadership Council. The holographic display showed hundreds of Crethian warships moving into attack formation. "This isn't just about crushing the resistance anymore. They want to make an example of us." Thera studied the tactical display, her scales shifting thoughtfully. "Then let them come. They still don't understand what they're really fighting against." The combined human Nilaxian fleet took up defensive positions around Helios base. They were outnumbered 4-1, but they had something the Crethians couldn't comprehend: genuine unity. Every ship crew included both species, working in perfect harmony. The Nilaxian healers had learned combat tactics, while human fighters had learned to channel and support healing abilities. Vorax's attack began with typical Crethian brutality. Waves of ships hammered the defenders' positions, expecting them to break under overwhelming force. Instead, they encountered a defense that seemed to adapt and strengthen with each blow. Lieutenant Reyes, commanding a squadron of fast attack vessels, demonstrated the new tactics they'd developed. Her ships would take hits that would normally be fatal, only to have Nilaxian healers repair both crew and hull damage in seconds. The Crethians found themselves unable to achieve the decisive casualties they relied on for victory. But the real surprise came when Diana unveiled their secret weapon, a technology developed through human Nilaxian cooperation. Using the healers' understanding of energy manipulation and human engineering, they had created devices that could temporarily disrupt the Crethians' neural control over their slave soldiers. As the devices activated across the battlefield, thousands of enslaved warriors suddenly found themselves free to choose. The result was chaos in the Crethian ranks. Ships stopped firing, crews turned on their commanders, and carefully planned attack formations dissolved. Vorax, watching his forces disintegrate, made a final desperate attempt to destroy the Helios base. He took command of his flagship personally, driving it toward the station's reactor core. If he couldn't win, he would ensure no one else could claim victory. What he didn't expect was the response this provoked. Dozens of ships, both human and Nilaxian, moved to intercept without orders. They weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting to protect their shared home, their community, their future. Thera, aboard the command center with Diana, watched as the defenders coordinated their efforts. "The Crethians never understood," she said, her voice carrying over the tactical channel. "True strength isn't about domination. It's about what we're willing to do for each other." The battle's climax came not with a massive explosion or a heroic sacrifice, but with a choice. Vorax's own crew, freed from neural control, turned against him. The Supreme Commander found himself arrested by the very soldiers he had enslaved. In the aftermath, as rescue ships collected survivors and repair crews began their work, Diana and Thera stood together in the Helios base's observation dome. Below them, humans and Nilaxians worked side by side, rebuilding what the battle had damaged. "What happens now?" Thera asked, watching a group of former Crethian slaves being welcomed by their liberators. Diana smiled. Now we build something new. The Crethian Empire is fracturing. Their whole system was based on fear and control. Without that, they can't hold together. But we can show the galaxy a different way. News of the battle spread quickly, but it wasn't just the victory that caught people's attention. It was the images of different species working together, helping each other, choosing to stand united against oppression. The Helios base became more than a military installation. It became a beacon of hope. 1 year later, the former Crethian territories had transformed. Where there had been slave markets now stood centers of healing and learning. Former enemies worked together to rebuild worlds damaged by generations of war. The Nilaxians resumed their traditional role as healers, but now they were protectors too, working alongside humans to ensure no species would ever again face slavery alone. Thera, now serving as an ambassador between species, often told new arrivals at the Helios base. The Crethians thought they could break us by keeping us apart. Instead, they'd brought us together. They taught us that the strongest bonds aren't forged by force. They are forged by choice, by understanding, and by standing together when it matters most. And somewhere in the galaxy, other enslaved species looked to the stars and saw hope where before there had been only darkness. The story of the humans and Nilaxians became a legend, passed from world to world, a reminder that freedom, once sparked, could never truly be extinguished.